A mysterious alien vessel appeared in Earth's orbit on June 15, 2087. The ship was silver and smooth, with no visible engines or windows. It simply arrived, causing worldwide panic and confusion. Within hours, every military on Earth was on high alert. News channels showed the same footage over and over. The strange craft hovering silently above the planet. Scientists tried to communicate with radio signals, but got no response. 3 days later, the alien ship finally sent a message. It came through on all frequencies, in perfect English. "We come in peace. We need your help." NASA quickly assembled a first contact team. Astronaut John Carter was chosen to lead the mission. He had logged more space hours than anyone else alive. Joining him was Dr. Lisa Wright, the leading xenobiologist who had written extensively about potential alien life. "This is what we trained for," John told Lisa as they prepared to board the shuttle. His voice was calm, but his hands shook slightly. Lisa nodded. "I just never expected it to actually happen in our lifetime." Their shuttle approached the alien vessel carefully. As they drew near, a door appeared in the smooth hull, opening silently. John guided the shuttle inside, where they found an area that seemed designed for human visitors, with breathable air and Earth-like gravity. When the aliens finally revealed themselves, they weren't what anyone expected. The Viridians stood over 7 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to shimmer. They had 4 arms and large almond-shaped eyes that reflected light like mirrors. "Welcome," said the lead alien in a musical voice. "I am Krell, ambassador of the Viridian people." John stepped forward. "I'm John Carter. This is Dr. Lisa Wright. We represent Earth." The aliens explained their situation through a translation device. Their home planet, Varus, circled a dying star. Their civilization had lasted 50,000 years, but now faced extinction. Their sun would soon go supernova, destroying their entire system. "Why Earth?" Lisa asked. "There must be many planets in the galaxy." Krell's large eyes blinked slowly. "We have observed your species for centuries. Humans possess something unique: adaptability. You survive against odds. You overcome challenges. You evolve quickly." The aliens revealed they had visited Earth many times throughout history, watching human development from the shadows. "We need your help," Krell continued, "not just to save our people, but to preserve our knowledge." The Viridians explained that they had chosen Earth after careful consideration. They had technology to share, medical advances, energy solutions, space travel innovations, but they needed humanity's help with something their own scientists couldn't solve. Back on Earth, the news of peaceful aliens caused both excitement and fear. Some people celebrated in the streets, while others stockpiled supplies and prepared for the worst. President Helen Martinez addressed the world. "Today marks a historic moment for humanity. We are not alone in the universe, and we have been asked for help." When John and Lisa returned to Earth, they'd brought with them detailed information about the Viridians. Scientists were amazed to learn about a species that had explored the stars when humans were still figuring out agriculture. "They're dying," Lisa explained during a UN briefing. "Their entire species. Their planet has maybe 2 years before their sun destroys it." John stood beside her, somber. "They've asked for our help, not just as refugees seeking shelter, but as a species hoping to survive. They believe human innovation can find solutions their science missed." The world's leaders debated the request. Some saw opportunity, others danger. But as more was learned about the Viridians and their peaceful history, most agreed that helping was the right choice. Within weeks, a joint human Viridian research facility was established. The last hope for an ancient alien civilization now rested with their newest galactic neighbors, humanity. On the edge of the Nevada desert, a new facility rose from the sand. Glass domes and white buildings sprawled across the landscape. Helicopters and vehicles moved constantly in and out. This was the Interspecies Diplomatic Center, the main point of contact between humans and Viridians. Ambassador Zexrol, The new Viridian representative stood over 7 feet tall with skin that shimmered in the sunlight. Today was an important day. He carried a small crystal cube that contained the collected knowledge of his civilization, the Viridian Codex. This represents 50,000 years of our science, art, and history, Zexrol explained to the human delegation. We offer it freely as a sign of trust. Dr. Peter Novak, a geneticist with curly hair and tired eyes, carefully accepted the cube. He had been working nonstop since the aliens arrived. The technology in this cube could advance Earth sciences by centuries, said Dr. Novak. But more importantly, it might help us save your people. The Viridians' problem was complex. Their star had been bathing their planet in harmful radiation for centuries. This radiation had damaged their DNA, making each generation weaker than the last. Their scientists had tried everything, but couldn't stop the deterioration. In the lab, Dr. Novak studied Viridian cells under a microscope. He compared them to healthy cells from their historical records. The damage is worse than they realized, he told Lisa Wright. Their DNA is breaking down faster than they can repair it. Even if we saved them from the supernova, their species would die out within 3 generations. The news spread quickly around the world. Humans debated whether they should help the aliens at all. How do we know this isn't a trick? Asked Senator Frank Wilson during a heated session of Congress. They could be planning an invasion. Others pointed to the medical technology the Viridians had already shared. In just 2 months, their knowledge had led to treatments for several previously incurable human diseases. They'd given us the tools to save millions of lives, President Martinez argued. We have a moral obligation to help them in return. Public opinion was divided. Some cities held welcome celebrations for the Viridians. In others, protesters marched with signs reading "Earth for Humans" and "Aliens Go Home." Dr. Novak worked day and night on a solution. He believed human DNA might hold the key. Humans had evolved on a planet with natural radiation and developed strong repair mechanisms. If we combine certain elements of human genetic resilience with Viridian biology, we might be able to create a treatment, he explained to a team of international scientists. The United Nations called a special session to vote on the issue. Representatives from every country gathered to decide if humanity would commit to helping the Viridians. Ambassador Zexrol addressed the assembly. We do not ask for charity. We offer partnership. Together, our species could accomplish great things. After 3 days of debate, the vote was taken. The resolution passed. Earth would officially help the Viridians. The plan would require a mission to the Viridian home system. Scientists needed to study their planet and the radiation directly. They also needed to collect genetic samples from any Viridians still living there. We'll need a ship, Lisa Wright said during the planning meeting. Our current spacecraft can't travel that far fast enough. Zexrol nodded. We will provide the technology to upgrade one of your vessels. We can reach our home in 3 months. The U.S. Horizon, an international space station, was chosen for the mission. Engineers began retrofitting it with Viridian technology. As preparations continued, Dr. Novak made a breakthrough. He successfully treated a sample of Viridian cells, stopping the genetic breakdown. This is just the first step, he cautioned, but it proves we can help them. For the first time since their arrival, the Viridians allowed themselves to feel hope. Perhaps their ancient civilization would survive after all, thanks to a young species from a small blue planet. The U.S. Horizon floated above Earth, its familiar shape now altered by Viridian technology. Sleek silver additions wrapped around the hull, housing engines that could bend space in ways humans had only theorized about. The ship had been transformed from an orbital research station into humanity's first true interstellar vessel. Captain Susan Reynolds stood on the bridge, watching her crew prepare for departure. At 45, she had spent half her life in space, but nothing had prepared her for this mission. Final systems check complete, Captain, said her first officer, Lieutenant Eric Mason. All stations report ready. Susan nodded. Begin departure sequence. The crew was a carefully selected mix of scientists, military personnel, and diplomats from 12 nations. Dr. Alan Foster, a biologist specializing in genetics, had been personally selected by Dr. Novak to carry on his research during the journey. Alan brought experimental gene therapy equipment that he hoped would save the Viridians. "I still can't believe we're actually doing this," Alan said to Lisa Wright as they watched Earth shrink in the viewport. 3 months to another star system. My grandfather would have said it was impossible. "The Viridian drive doesn't actually move us faster than light," Lisa explained. "It creates a tunnel through space-time. We're still trying to understand the physics." 5 Viridians joined the crew of 80 humans. They served as guides and technical advisors, helping the humans operate the new systems. Krell, the ambassador from First Contact, led the Viridian group. As the horizon passed Mars, the Viridian engines fully engage. The stars outside seemed to stretch and blur. Then, with a flash of blue light, the ship entered what the crew called fold space. The journey gave humans and Viridians time to learn about each other. The aliens taught their language, sharing the complex musical tones that formed their speech. They explained their history through holographic displays that filled the ship's main hall with images of ancient Viridian cities. "Your civilization once spanned hundreds of worlds?" asked Daniel Lee, the mission historian, as he watched images of vast space stations and beautiful alien landscapes. Krell made a sound like chimes in the wind, a Viridian sigh. "Yes. For thousands of years, we explored and settled much of this galactic arm. Then came the Great Collapse. The Viridians revealed that their empire had fallen 5,000 years ago after a devastating war with another species. The conflict had destroyed most of their colonies, forcing the survivors back to their home planet. We chose peace after that," Krell explained. "We turned our science toward healing rather than expansion." The crew learned that Viridian society was built around the concept of preserving knowledge. Their highest value was the continuation of wisdom through generations. 1 month into the journey, the ship experienced its first crisis. Several systems suddenly failed, including life support in 2 sections. Emergency protocols activated just in time. Captain Reynolds ordered a complete investigation. "This wasn't an accident," she told her security team after reviewing the evidence. "Someone deliberately sabotaged those systems." Security Chief Greg Daniels found unusual code in the ship's computers. "It looks like it was designed to make the failures appear random," he explained. Suspicion immediately fell on the Viridians, but Captain Reynolds remained cautious. "We can't jump to conclusions. This could be human sabotage just as easily." The incident created tension on the ship. Some crew members began avoiding the Viridians. Others defended them, pointing out that the aliens would not endanger a mission meant to save their species. As they approached the halfway point of their journey, Alan Foster made progress with his genetic work. Using samples from both species, he developed a treatment that showed promise in the lab. "We might actually pull this off," he told Lisa during a late-night research session. What neither of them knew was that the real challenges still lay ahead. The sabotage was only the first sign of troubles to come, and the Viridian home system held secrets that even the aliens themselves didn't fully understand. The U.S. horizon emerged from fold space at the edge of the Viridian system. The crew gathered at the viewports to see the alien home for the first time. What they saw shocked them. Varys, once a blue-green jewel, now looked sickly and dim. Its sun burned an angry red, occasionally sending massive flares into space. 3 planets in the system were completely shattered, their remains forming asteroid fields. "It's worse than our reports indicated," Krell said quietly. "The stellar degradation has accelerated." Captain Reynolds ordered a full scan of the system. "How much time do we have before the supernova?" The science officer, Lieutenant Olivia Wells, studied the readings with growing alarm. "Based on these energy patterns, 3 months at most. Not the year we expected." As they approached Varys, they detected faint signals coming from the surface. The once great Viridian civilization had been reduced to underground bunkers and shelters. No cities remained above ground. "Our communication systems are picking up a transmission," reported Eric Mason. "They're requesting immediate contact." When the faces of the Viridian elders appeared on screen, even Krell seemed shocked by their appearance. Their blue skin had faded to a pale gray, and their eyes had lost their reflective quality. "Welcome to what remains of our world," said the lead elder, who introduced herself as Tirivox. "We had almost given up hope." The ship established orbit, and a landing party prepared to descend to the surface. The team included Alan Foster, Lisa Wright, Captain Reynolds, and 2 security officers. 3 Viridians, including Krell, would guide them. The shuttle landed near a massive underground entrance. The surface of Varys was barren and cracked, with occasional pools of glowing liquid. The air was thin but breathable with supplemental oxygen. Inside the main shelter, the humans discovered the true state of the Viridian people. Only about 300,000 remained from a species that once numbered in the billions. Most were ill, showing signs of genetic deterioration far worse than the samples they had studied. "You told us your population was in the millions," Lisa said to Krell, feeling betrayed. The Elder Council explained that they had been ashamed to reveal the full extent of their decline. They feared humans might not help a species so close to extinction. Dr. Foster set up his equipment in what had once been a hospital. After examining several Viridians, he delivered devastating news to Captain Reynolds. "The treatment we developed won't work," he said, his voice breaking. "Their genetic damage is far too advanced. The radiation has mutated their cells in ways we didn't anticipate." "What options do we have?" Susan asked. "Complete genetic restructuring," Foster replied. "Not treatment of the current population, but creation of a new generation with modified DNA that can withstand the radiation effects." The Elder Council requested a private meeting with Captain Reynolds. When she returned to the human quarters, her face was grim. "They've asked us to evacuate as many of their people as possible to Earth," she told her officers. "They're requesting asylum for their species." The crew debated the implications. The Horizon could only transport a few thousand Viridians. Even if Earth sent more ships immediately, they could save maybe 50,000 at most before the sun exploded. "We can't just abandon the rest," Lisa argued. "And we can't bring their entire population to Earth," countered Greg Daniels. "We don't have the resources." As they argued, Alan Foster worked through the night in his lab. By morning, he had developed a radical proposal. "I believe we could save the Viridian species through hybridization," he announced to the stunned group. "Not by treating their current population, but by creating embryos that combine the strongest elements of both human and Viridian DNA." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. This wasn't just scientific aid anymore. This was the creation of a new species, part human, part Viridian. "We need to decide quickly," Captain Reynolds said, looking at the red giant star visible through the bunker's observation dome. "That sun won't wait for us to debate ethics." The emergency meeting aboard the Horizon lasted for hours. Dr. Alan Foster presented his hybridization plan in detail, using holographic displays to show the genetic structures he proposed. "The Viridian DNA is too damaged to repair completely," he explained, pointing to the broken gene sequences. "But if we combine it with human DNA, targeting specific resilience factors, we could create viable embryos that would preserve the core of Viridian biology while surviving the radiation damage." The room erupted with questions and objections. "You're talking about creating an entirely new species," said Lieutenant Mason. "Do we have the right to do that?" Dr. Foster nodded. "This isn't a decision I make lightly. But the alternative is extinction for an entire civilization." Captain Reynolds watched the debate with growing concern. As a military officer, she had trained for clear-cut decisions. This situation had no precedent. "What do the Viridians think of this plan?" she finally asked. Krell had been silent throughout the presentation. Now all eyes turned to him. Our people have always valued the continuation of knowledge above all else, he said slowly. But some will see this as the end of the true Viridian species, not its salvation. Before they could continue, an alarm sounded. The red sun was sending out another massive flare, larger than any previous one. The bunker shook violently. "We need to get back to the ship," shouted Greg Daniels. As they prepared to evacuate, an elderly Viridian approached them. He introduced himself as Jexvok, the keeper of ancient knowledge. "There might be another way," he said. "Follow me." Jexvok led them deeper into the bunker system, through tunnels that appeared much older than the rest of the structure. They finally reached a sealed door covered in symbols. "Our ancestors built defenses against stellar events," the old Viridian explained. "Knowledge we have forgotten until the crisis forced us to search our oldest archives." Inside the chamber stood a massive machine, covered in dust but showing signs of recent cleaning. Crystal columns rose from a central platform to the ceiling. "A planetary shield generator," Krell whispered in awe. "I thought these were only legends." Captain Reynolds looked skeptical. "If you had this technology, why haven't you used it already?" "It requires tremendous energy," Jexvok explained, "and knowledge we no longer possess. The system is incomplete." Lisa examined the ancient controls. "These look similar to the technology on your ship. If we combine our understanding with your historical records, we might be able to activate it." The next week passed in frantic work. Engineers from the Horizon worked alongside Viridian technicians to restore the shield system. Dr. Foster continued his genetic research in case the shield failed. Captain Reynolds made a difficult decision. "We need to split our resources. Half the crew will remain here to work on the shield. The rest will take the Horizon back to Earth for supplies and to report on the situation." The Viridian Council agreed to the plan. "If the shield works, it might buy us 6 more months before the final collapse," said Tirivox. "Enough time to implement Foster's plan if necessary." The day arrived to test the shield. The restored generator hummed with power as the combined team made final adjustments. "Energy levels are holding," reported Olivia. "Shield formation in 3, 2, 1. The crystal columns glowed blindingly bright. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, through the observation dome, they watched as a shimmering blue field expanded across the sky. A cheer went up from both humans and Viridians. The shield was working, deflecting the worst of the stellar radiation. That evening, the Horizon prepared to depart for Earth. Captain Reynolds would lead the return mission, while Lisa Wright would remain behind with Dr. Foster and 30 volunteers. "We'll be back in 2 months with everything you need," Susan promised as she boarded the shuttle. As the Horizon disappeared into fold space, Lisa turned to Dr. Foster. "Do you think your hybridization plan will work?" Alan looked at the shimmering shield overhead. "It has to. That shield is just buying time. The sun will still go supernova. When it does, there needs to be a future for these people, one way or another." What none of them realized was that not everyone wanted that future to arrive. In the shadows of the ancient bunker, a group of Viridian purists watched and waited, determined to stop what they saw as the corruption of their species. The Horizon returned to Earth with its shocking news. The situation on Varys was worse than anyone had imagined. Within days, governments around the world mobilized resources. 3 more ships were quickly retrofitted with Viridian technology. Dr. Maria Garcia, the leading expert in developmental biology, volunteered to join the mission. At 36, she had revolutionized artificial womb technology for human medicine. Now her skills would be used to save an alien species. "We're bringing everything we can," she told Captain Reynolds as they loaded the ships. "Incubation chambers, genetic sequencers, enough supplies to last a year." The journey back to Varys seemed longer with the weight of their mission. When they finally arrived, they found both progress and problems. The shield was holding, but with weakening strength. The sun continued to destabilize, sending increasingly powerful radiation against the protective barrier. Dr. Foster greeted them with mixed news. We've made breakthroughs with the hybridization process. The initial tests show viable embryonic development. He led them to his lab where several small, transparent chambers contained tiny developing embryos. They had features that were neither fully human nor viridian, a true hybrid species. The first successful combination of our genetic material, he explained. They're developing faster than human embryos, but slower than viridian ones. Dr. Garcia immediately joined the research team. Her expertise helped solve several problems they had encountered with the incubation process. These chambers will support full development, she confirmed after making adjustments. We can begin large-scale implementation. Not all viridians were pleased with this solution. A growing faction opposed what they called the dilution of our sacred bloodline. They held secret meetings in the deeper levels of the bunker system. Their leader, Zevran, had once been a respected geneticist. What Foster proposes is not salvation but extinction by another name, he told his followers. True viridians will cease to exist, replaced by these half-breeds. The sabotage began small equipment failures, missing supplies, corrupted data. But as the hybridization program progressed, the attacks became bolder. One night, alarms blared throughout the facility. Fire had broken out in the main laboratory. Security teams rushed to the scene, finding 3 incubation chambers destroyed and a viridian technician unconscious on the floor. When she recovered, she described seeing masked figures tampering with the equipment before attacking her. Captain Reynolds called an emergency meeting with the Viridian Council. We believe there's an organized resistance to our efforts. We need your help to find them before they cause more damage. The council was divided. Some supported finding and stopping the saboteurs. Others seemed reluctant to act against fellow Viridians, even extremists. Krell stepped forward. I will help you. This is not just about preserving our genetic material. It's about preserving our values and knowledge. Those cannot survive if we fail. Working with the human security chief, Krell formed a joint team to investigate the sabotage. They discovered hidden messages and meeting locations, slowly building a picture of the resistance network. What they found alarmed them more than expected. The conspiracy extended beyond Varys. Some Viridians on Earth had been communicating with the extremists, sharing fears the humans planned to create a servant species rather than preserve Viridian culture. As they worked to counter the sabotage, worse news arrived from the science team monitoring the sun. The shield is failing faster than predicted, reported Lieutenant Wells. The stellar core is collapsing at an accelerated rate. We don't have months anymore. We have weeks, maybe less. Dr. Foster and Dr. Garcia worked around the clock to speed up the hybridization process. They had successfully created 500 viable embryos, but their goal had been thousands. We need more time, Maria said, exhaustion clear in her voice. Time is the one thing we don't have, Alan replied, looking at the latest solar readings. Captain Reynolds ordered the evacuation process to begin immediately. The most advanced hybrid embryos would go first, along with the youngest and healthiest Viridians. Every ship would be filled to capacity. As they prepared to leave, Krell discovered the extremists' final plan: to destroy all the embryos and the research data, believing extinction was better than hybridization. We need to move now, he told Captain Reynolds. They're planning to strike before the first ship leaves. The race to save a civilization had become a race against enemies both cosmic and internal. The Viridian sun pulsed with angry red flares. Each burst grew larger than the last, pushing against the weakening shield that protected the planet. On the surface, the evacuation had turned into a desperate rush. Captain Reynolds coordinated from the command center, directing ships to different landing zones. The shield is down to 30% capacity, reported Lieutenant Wells. At this rate, it will fail completely within 48 hours. Security teams led by Krell had captured most of the extremist group, but their leader, Zevran, remained free. Intelligence suggested he planned one final act of sabotage. In the main laboratory, Dr. Foster and Dr. Garcia prepared the hybrid embryos for transport. Each incubation chamber was carefully disconnected and moved to specialized containers on the evacuation ships. "That's the last group from this section," Maria said, sealing the container with 20 embryos inside. "We've saved 812 in total." Alan nodded tiredly. "Not as many as we hoped, but enough to give the species a future." Across the bunker system, Viridians gathered with the few possessions they could carry. Many were still too ill from radiation exposure to move without help. Human crew members assisted them onto the ships, medical teams providing treatment during boarding. The Viridian Council had one final task before evacuation. Deep beneath the main bunker lay the central archive, containing the complete history and knowledge of their civilization. This knowledge had been partially shared with humans through the Codex, but much remained only here. "We must preserve the archive," insisted Elder Terrivox. "Without it, the children will never know their true heritage." Dr. Foster volunteered to lead the team to secure the archive. "The hybrid children will need this connection to their past," he said. "It's as important as their genetic heritage." With a small group of humans and Viridians, Foster descended to the archive chamber. The room was vast, filled with crystal data cores glowing with stored information. They began the process of transferring the data to portable storage units. As they worked, the facility shook violently. Above ground, another solar flare had struck the shield, causing sections to fail completely. Radiation poured through the gaps, heating the planet's surface to dangerous levels. "All teams, accelerate evacuation," Captain Reynolds ordered through the communication system. "We have less time than expected." In the archive chamber, Foster's team hurried their work. Suddenly, the doors sealed shut. Security systems designed to protect the archive during emergencies had activated, trapping them inside. "We need to override this," said one of the human engineers, rushing to the control panel. A voice came from the shadows. "You will not leave with our sacred knowledge." Zevran stepped forward, holding a weapon pointed at the group. "If Viridian civilization must end, it will end purely, not as some hybrid abomination." Krell had anticipated this move. He and his security team had followed Foster's group at a distance. They now worked to bypass the sealed doors from outside. Inside, Foster tried to reason with Zevran. "These archives won't survive the supernova. Nothing on this planet will. But your knowledge, your culture, your species can continue through the children we've created. They are not Viridians," Zevran shouted. "They are something else entirely." "Yes," Foster agreed calmly. "They are something new. But they carry your genetic legacy, your potential. Evolution has always worked this way. Change and adaptation ensure survival." Before Zevran could respond, Krell and his team broke through the doors. In the confusion, the extremist was subdued. With the archive secured, the final evacuation began. The last ships prepared for departure as the shield flickered and failed in more places. Foster and his team were scheduled for the final ship, along with Captain Reynolds and the remaining crew. As they boarded, the ground began to break apart. Massive cracks appeared as the planet's crust responded to the intense radiation. Their ship barely cleared the atmosphere as the shield collapsed completely. Looking back, they watched the surface of Varys begin to glow red from the unfiltered stellar energy. 10 years later, on the terraformed southern continent of Mars, a new community thrived. Domed structures protected a landscape of gardens and buildings that combined both human and Viridian architecture. In a special school at the center of the settlement, 30 children gathered for their history lesson. They looked mostly human, but their skin had a faint blue shimmer and their eyes reflected light in unusual ways. Dr. Alan Foster, now gray-haired but still energetic, stood before them. "Today we'll learn about Varys, the world your ancestors came from," he said, activating a holographic display from the archive.